High Admiral Vexthor stood at the command center of the Nexary flagship Eternal Vigilance, his silver-scaled fingers drumming against the holographic display. The images before him showed thousands of Earth facilities, each containing groups of young humans engaged in various activities. Curious, he muttered, his third eye narrowing. They begin conditioning their warriors at such a young age. First Analyst Miratel adjusted her sensory implants, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with concern. Admiral, I'm not certain these are military facilities. The data suggests dash. Look at the evidence, Vexthor interrupted, gesturing at the displays. Structured daily routines. Physical conditioning exercises. Combat simulation zones they call playgrounds. Mathematical and tactical training. Even their entertainment focuses on conflict and victory. He expanded one image showing children playing capture the flag. They're clearly breeding a warrior race. Miratel's patterns flickered uncertainly. Sir, my research indicates these are called schools and daycare centers. They appear to be educational dash. Education for war, Vexthor stated firmly. The Nexary Collective cannot allow this threat to develop unchecked. Humanity's expansion must be contained now, before these training facilities produce another generation of soldiers. He straightened his ceremonial armor, all four arms moving in perfect synchronization. The Council has authorized preemptive action. We will seize these young warriors in training and use them to force humanity's submission. Better to act now than face their full military might in a decade. Admiral, Miratel tried one last time, the ethical implications of targeting children dash. They forfeited ethical considerations when they began militarizing their young, Vexthor declared. Deploy the stealth carriers. I want precision strikes on these facilities within the next solar rotation. Humanity will learn that the Nexary Collective does not tolerate threats to galactic stability. As orders echoed through the command center, Miratel's patterns dimmed with dread. She had studied human history extensively during first contact preparations. There was one consistent theme throughout their records: nothing united humans more quickly or more terrifyingly than a threat to their children. The Nexary were about to learn this lesson the hard way. 12 hours later, at Little Explorers Daycare in suburban Colorado, 4-year-old Emma Martinez was building a block tower when the air began to shimmer. Her teacher Ms. Sarah reached for the emergency beacon, but the Nexary phase field had already disabled all communications. The last thing Emma saw before the stasis field activated was Ms. Sarah running toward her, desperate fear in her eyes. Then everything went dark. Similar scenes played out across Earth as Nexary strike teams deployed with surgical precision. They encountered minimal resistance, exactly as planned. Within hours, thousands of children were in custody aboard Nexary vessels rapidly retreating to safe space. Admiral Vexthor reviewed the preliminary reports with satisfaction. Clean execution. Minimal casualties. The humans won't dare retaliate while we hold their young warriors. In the corner of the command center, Miratel accessed the human information networks one final time. Her patterns flashed in alarm as she saw the first responses beginning to spread across their global communications grid. The humans weren't cowering in fear or preparing to surrender. They were angry. The kind of anger that reshapes worlds. As the Nexary fleet accelerated away from Earth, they remained unaware that they had just committed the gravest mistake in their species' history. They had not, as they believed, seized military assets to force a strategic surrender. They had stolen children. And humanity was coming for them. Deep in the Pentagon's Crisis Command Center, General Helena Chen stared at the satellite footage of the Nexary ships vanishing into fold space. Her granddaughter had been at one of the targeted preschools. The thought of Sophie in alien hands made her blood boil, but she forced herself to focus on the tactical displays. I want every ship we have ready for immediate deployment, she ordered, her voice steady despite her rage. Contact our allies. Call in every favor. This is no longer about politics or treaties or jurisdictions. She turned to face the room full of military and civilian leaders. This is about getting our children back. And making damn sure no one ever thinks about trying something like this again. The next few hours would show the galaxy exactly why you should never, ever mess with human children. The first images hit the global networks like a nuclear blast. Security footage showing alien ships materializing over schools and daycares. Children vanishing in flashes of light. Teachers reaching helplessly for their students before being paralyzed by stasis fields. Humanity's response defied every prediction in the Nexary tactical databases. There were no riots. No mass panic. No breakdown of social order. Instead, a terrible calm descended over Earth's population. Parents who had been bitter enemies over politics yesterday now stood shoulder to shoulder, their differences forgotten. Religious leaders who had preached against each other for generations now joined hands in common cause. In orbit, Admiral Sarah O'Connor surveyed the rapidly growing fleet from the bridge of the UES Hyperion. Ships from every nation were converging: American, Chinese, Russian, Indian, European Union. Vessels that just days ago had been conducting war games against each other now moved in perfect coordination. Latest count shows 312 combat-capable ships assembled, her XO reported. More arriving every hour. The Chinese are sending their entire stellar defense force. Russia has activated their reserve fleet. Even the North Koreans are contributing vessels. O'Connor nodded grimly. And the civilian ships? Over 2,000 volunteering for support roles. Mining vessels refitting as ammunition carriers. Cargo haulers converting to troop transport. Cruise liners becoming hospital ships. The orbital shipyards are working around the clock to arm them. She studied the tactical display showing the Nexary fleet's projected course. The aliens clearly expected humanity to be paralyzed by fear and indecision. They didn't understand that they had just united humanity in a way no external threat ever had before. In Geneva, the United Nations Security Council met in emergency session. For the first time in its history, a resolution passed with unanimous consent from all 193 member states. There would be no negotiation. No diplomacy. The resolution contained just 2 words: bring them home. Deep in the Colorado mountains, Dr. James Chen worked frantically in his quantum physics lab, surrounded by holographic equations. His daughter had been taken from her kindergarten class. The thought of her scared and alone on an alien ship haunted his every waking moment. The Nexary fold drive leaves a distinctive quantum wake, he explained to the military observers. Their stealth tech may hide their ships, but they can't hide the space-time distortions from their engines. Give me enough quantum sensors and I can track them anywhere in the galaxy. The observers exchanged glances. How many sensors would you need? Thousands. Spread across multiple star systems. You'll have them within 48 hours. Every observatory and research station in human space is being red-asked. Private companies are donating their entire satellite networks. Chen turned back to his equations with grim determination. Good. Because I'm going to give you something else, a way to disrupt their fold drives mid-jump. They took our children through their fancy space-time tunnels. I'm going to find a way to collapse those tunnels while they're still inside. In Moscow, Washington, Beijing, and a dozen other capitals, military leaders gathered to plan the largest coordinated operation in human history. Traditional rivalries and suspicions were set aside. Every scrap of intelligence was shared. Every military asset was placed under joint command. General Chen surveyed the latest force deployment plans with cold satisfaction. The Nexary thought they had seized leverage over humanity. Instead, they had triggered something unprecedented: true human unity. Every person, every resource, every capability humanity possessed was now focused on a single goal: reaching those children and making the aliens regret their choices. On the Nexary flagship, First Analyst Miratel's patterns flashed with increasing anxiety as she monitored human communications. She had expected fear, chaos, diplomatic outreach. Instead, she saw something that chilled her to her core, humans moving with unified, implacable purpose. "Admiral," she reported, "the humans, they're not behaving according to any of our psychological models. The predicted social breakdown isn't occurring. Instead, they're organizing, coordinating. Every human nation is pooling resources. They're converting civilian ships to military use faster than we thought possible. Their quantum physicists are already working on ways to track our fold signatures." Admiral Vexthor dismissed her concerns. "Let them try. By the time they mount any meaningful response, we'll be safely beyond their reach. They'll have no choice but to submit to our demands." Miratel's patterns dimmed further. The Admiral still didn't understand. The humans weren't preparing to submit. They were preparing to hunt. And in the holding cells throughout the Nexary fleet, thousands of children waited. Some cried. Some were scared. But others watched their captors with eerily calm expressions. They had grown up on stories of humanity's greatest moments, tales of impossible odds overcome, of determination in the face of overwhelming force, of the lengths humans would go to protect their own. They knew, with the pure certainty of childhood, that they would be rescued. And that the aliens would learn why every human child grew up knowing one universal truth. Don't mess with human children. Ever. The hunt was about to begin. The quantum wake detector on the UES Hyperion chirped its first alert 3 weeks into the pursuit. Dr. Chen's hands flew across the holographic interface, confirming what the sensors had detected. "Got you," he whispered, dark circles under his eyes from weeks of sleepless work. "Admiral O'Connor, we have a definitive trace. The Nexary fleet passed through this sector less than 48 hours ago." O'Connor studied the three-dimensional star map as hundreds of sensor readings coalesced into a clear trail. Like footprints in fresh snow, the Nexary's fold drive signatures left subtle distortions in the quantum fabric of space. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships prepare for synchronized fold jump. We're not letting them increase their lead." Across 50 light-years of space, over 3,000 human vessels moved as one. Military ships formed the spearhead, with converted civilian vessels following in their wake. The massive hospital ships brought up the rear, their crews praying they wouldn't be needed but ready for anything. On the bridge of the Chinese destroyer Zhenghe, Captain Lin watched the quantum wake readings with fierce intensity. His son had been taken from a Beijing kindergarten. Every jump brought them closer. "The Nexary's greatest mistake," he commented to his XO, "was believing that stealing our children would make us cautious. Instead, they've freed us from all restraint. There are no political considerations holding us back now. No diplomatic niceties to observe." Deep in the Hyperion's engineering section, Dr. Chen refined his fold drive disruptor design. The device was dangerous, experimental, exactly the kind of technology that would normally require years of careful testing. But these weren't normal times. "The physics is sound," he explained to the engineering team. "When activated, it will create a cascading quantum resonance that will collapse any active fold tunnels within range. The Nexary will be forced back into normal space." "And our ships?" someone asked. "As long as we're not actively jumping when it triggers, we'll be fine." Probably. No one questioned the risk. They had all volunteered knowing this mission would require pushing human technology to its absolute limits. Meanwhile, aboard the Nexary flagship, First Analyst Miratel's warnings were becoming harder to ignore. The humans weren't just following, they were gaining ground. "Impossible," Admiral Vexthor muttered, studying the sensor readings. "Their fold drive technology should be decades behind ours. How are they tracking us through fold space?" "Sir," Miratel's patterns pulsed with urgency, "I've been analyzing their communications. They've completely restructured their entire society for this pursuit. Every scientific institution is focused on developing new technologies to find us. They're burning through decades of potential progress in weeks. Their determination is impressive, the admiral admitted. But ultimately futile. We still have their children. They'll have to stand down once we make our demands clear. Miratel's patterns flashed in frustration. The admiral still didn't understand what they had awakened. Humans were supposed to be a young, fractious species, divided by ancient rivalries. Instead, the Nexari had united them in common cause, giving them something even more dangerous than advanced technology. A purpose. A mission that every human agreed was worth any sacrifice. In the holding cells, the children were changing too. The youngest ones still cried for their parents, but the older ones had organized themselves. They shared stories, sang songs, kept track of days. Most importantly, they watched. Listened. Learned about their captors. 10-year-old Marcus Santos, taken from his school in Brazil, had become an unofficial leader. He noticed how the Nexari guards' bioluminescent patterns changed with their moods. How their technology responded to specific gestures. Small details that might prove useful. My mom's a xenobiologist, he told the other children during quiet hours. She always says that understanding other species is the key to dealing with them. So we watch. We learn. And we stay ready. The children understood something their captors didn't, they weren't just prisoners. They were humanity's forward scouts, gathering intelligence from inside enemy territory. Back in the pursuit fleet, the first real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A civilian mining ship's specialty sensors detected trace elements in space dust that had been agitated by recent fold jumps. The Nexari are being forced to take shorter jumps, O'Connor announced to the fleet commanders. They're burning through fuel faster than they expected. Having to maintain life support for thousands of children is straining their resources. The news energized the pursuit fleet. The Nexari's technological advantage was being offset by the logistical burden of their captives. More importantly, it meant the children were still alive, still being cared for. But time was running out. The Nexari were heading for their core systems, where they would have the advantage of prepared defenses and supply lines. The human fleet had to catch them before they reached safe harbor. Dr. Chen's fold drive disruptor was ready for testing. The device hummed ominously in the Hyperion's main laboratory, its experimental quantum fields making everyone's teeth itch. One shot, he told Admiral O'Connor. We'll only get one chance to use this before they adapt their shields. We have to make it count. O'Connor nodded grimly. Then we make it count. Signal the fleet, all ships prepare for combat operations. The next phase begins now. The hunt was entering its final stages. Soon, the Nexari would learn the true cost of their mistake. The Nexari fleet's latest fold jump ended in chaos. Alarms blared throughout the flagship as ships emerged from fold space at random points, their carefully coordinated formation shattered. What happened? Admiral Vexthor demanded, his scales paling as damage reports flooded in. Unknown energy surge, a technician reported. It collapsed our fold tunnels mid-jump. 3 support ships are reporting critical drive failures. Miratel's patterns flashed urgent warning colors. Sir, the humans are here. Multiple contacts emerging from fold space. The tactical display lit up with hundreds, then thousands of human vessels appearing in attack formation. They had somehow predicted exactly where the Nexari fleet would emerge. In the Hyperion's lab, Dr. Chen sagged with exhaustion as the quantum disruptor powered down. Direct hit, he reported. The fold tunnel collapse worked exactly as calculated. Admiral O'Connor's voice crackled over the comm, well done, Doctor. All ships, battle stations. Operation Nursery Rhyme is now in effect. The human fleet moved with practiced precision, splitting into predetermined attack groups. Converted mining vessels used their industrial-grade shields to absorb Nexary fire while warships maneuvered into striking position. Hospital ships hung back, protected by screens of fighters. But the humans weren't just attacking, they were hurting the Nexary fleet, forcing them toward a specific point in space. In the flagship's holding cells, Marcus Santos felt the ship shudder under human weapons fire. "Everyone remember what to do," he whispered to the other children. They had been preparing for this moment, passing plans from cell to cell through their network of whispers. The Nexary guards were distracted by the battle, their patterns showing stress and fear. They never noticed the children moving into position near the cell force fields, waiting for their moment. On the bridge, Admiral Vexthor watched in growing horror as his fleet's formation continued to disintegrate. The humans weren't fighting like a young species should. Their tactics showed centuries of warfare experience, adapted perfectly to space combat. "How?" he demanded. "How are they executing such complex maneuvers with a cobbled-together fleet?" Miratel's patterns shifted to urgent crimson. "Sir, I've been trying to tell you. Look at their ship movements. Every major human conflict style is represented: American shock and awe, Russian deep battle doctrine, Chinese strategic deception, Israeli tactical flexibility. They've combined all their military traditions into something entirely new." "Sir," a tactical officer interrupted, "we're detecting massive energy builds up from the human fleet. Some kind of synchronized weapons charging." Aboard the Hyperion, O'Connor gave the order they had spent weeks preparing for. "All ships, initiate protocol lullaby." Thousands of human vessels fired simultaneously. But they weren't targeting the Nexary ship's critical systems. Instead, precision strikes disabled engines, weapons, and communications in a carefully choreographed sequence. "Status report." Vexthor shouted as systems failed across his fleet. They're crippling us, sir. Not destroying. Every shot is calculated to disable without risking the children." In the holding cells, the children felt the ship's artificial gravity fluctuate. Marcus gave the signal they had practiced. In every cell block, children began singing, thousands of young voices raised in eerie unison. The Nexary guards' patterns showed confusion, then fear as the singing grew louder. Human children weren't supposed to be this organized, this coordinated. They were supposed to be scared, broken. Instead, the children sang louder, their voices echoing through the halls like a promise, or a threat. On the bridge, Miratel's patterns suddenly flared with realization. "Admiral, the human ships, they're not just disabling us. They're positioning us. Look at the fleet formation they're forcing us into." The tactical display showed the truth. The human fleet was arranging the crippled Nexary vessels into a precise pattern, one that would allow them to board and secure every ship simultaneously while maintaining interlocking fields of fire to prevent any escape attempts. "It's over, sir," Miratel said softly. "They've planned this moment down to the smallest detail. Every shot. Every maneuver. All precisely calculated to minimize any risk to the children while ensuring total tactical control." Admiral Vexthor stared at the display, finally understanding the magnitude of his error. He had thought stealing children would give him leverage over humanity. Instead, he had given humanity's disparate nations a single, unified purpose. He had forced them to set aside all their differences and combine their strengths. He had pushed them to advance their technology at an impossible pace. Most terrifyingly, he had made them stop fighting each other and start fighting together. The first human boarding shuttles were already launching. The children's singing grew louder. The rescue was about to begin. When the first breaching charges blew through the Nexary flagship's hull, no one was prepared for what came through. The boarding teams weren't just soldiers, they were parents, teachers, first responders, all volunteering for the most dangerous phase of the rescue. Sarah Chen, a kindergarten teacher from Denver, moved alongside Marine Special Forces, her knowledge of child psychology just as vital as their combat training. "Remember, she told her team, these kids have been traumatized. They'll need familiar faces, familiar voices. The Nexari defenders never stood a chance. Their combat algorithms couldn't account for the terrible efficiency of humans fighting to reach imprisoned children. The boarders moved with a precision born of weeks of preparation, their advance unstoppable. In the cell blocks, Marcus Santos led the children in singing even louder as the sounds of fighting drew closer. The Nexari guards' patterns showed pure panic now, they had never seen their supposedly impenetrable barriers fail so quickly. When the rescue teams reached the first cells, they found the children already organized, the older ones caring for the younger, everyone ready to move. Marcus stepped forward as the force fields dropped. The guards change shifts every 6 hours, he reported with military crispness. Their weapons have biometric locks, but their communication devices don't. We've mapped every route to the escape pods, and we know which sections have emergency life support. The Marine sergeant stared at the 10-year-old in amazement. You've been gathering intelligence? Marcus shrugged. Mom always says knowledge is power. So we watched. We learned. We stayed ready. On the bridge, Admiral Vexthor watched helplessly as human forces secured ship after ship. Their boarding strategy was flawless, clearly designed to minimize any risk of hostage casualties while preventing any possibility of escape. Sir, Miratel's patterns showed resignation, the humans are offering terms. Terms? Vexthor laughed bitterly. What terms could they possibly dash? Admiral O'Connor's voice cut through the command channel. This is a one-time offer, Nexari. Surrender now, provide all medical data about the children's treatment in captivity, and cooperate fully with the evacuation. In return, your crews will be treated according to human military law and return to your territory once the children are safe. She paused before adding, refuse, and will demonstrate exactly how much mercy humans show to those who harm our children. In the end, it wasn't even a choice. The Nexari surrendered en masse, their will to resist broken by the implacable determination of their human attackers. The evacuation was a masterpiece of logistics. Hospital ships moved in with teams of pediatricians, child psychologists, and trauma specialists. Every child was accounted for, their medical needs assessed, their families contacted. Emma Martinez reunited with her parents on the hospital ship Mercy, clutching her favorite stuffed animal that another child had shared during captivity. The aliens were scared of us, Daddy, she said solemnly. Not at first. But they got scared when we started working together. In the aftermath, humanity's unified response reshaped galactic politics. The Nexari Collective faced sanctions from every spacefaring species, their reputation in ruins. But the greater change was in humanity itself. The bonds forged during the crisis didn't dissolve once the children were safe. The technologies developed for the rescue revolutionized human space travel. The military cooperation established new standards for joint operations. Most importantly, humanity had learned what they could accomplish when truly united. 1 year later, a memorial was dedicated in Geneva. It showed a simple hologram, thousands of points of light, representing every ship that had joined the rescue fleet. Below it, a plaque carried words that would be remembered across the galaxy. To those who would threaten our children. Know that we are many nations, but we are one species. Know that our differences mean nothing when our children are at risk. Know that we will cross the stars to find you. Know that we will never stop. And know that we will never forget. Never again. In the decades that followed, other species would sometimes ask why humans were so protective of their young, why the threat to children had united them so completely. The answer was always the same, because they were our children. Because they were innocent. Because they were the future we would die to protect. It was a lesson the galaxy learned well, human children are not leverage. They are not bargaining chips. They are not tactical assets. They are the one line you do not cross. Ever.